Today, we're going to talk about building your own website. This is something that we kind of do in all kinds of shapes and sizes. We're building a website for the company, we're building some kind of site to do stuff. And we're going to take a peek at this site right here. You can get a quick glimpse of it. I'm putting up a QR code that you can go navigate to if you want to go visit procoder.io that I use to do stuff here. This is how we're going to dig into what is behind this website and what it's looking like. And we're going to look at all that stuff in today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. But before I get started, be sure to, if you're watching this on YouTube, whether it's live or you're catching this on a replay, give me a like out there, would you? Hit the like button and maybe consider subscribing if you're interested. So what we've got here, surely, as you know, in the past, I've worked with Java technology. I have a long history of being able to do that. I worked on the Spring team for 13 years, and that's a solid piece of technology. That's rock solid. But it's not the only thing, the only game in town. What I wanted to do when I kind of relaunched my brand is I wanted to focus this channel on being able to give you tips and tricks and lessons. I've been in this industry now 29 years. I've learned a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to be able to offer a lot of knowledge and understanding. So I was going to share videos that you catch on YouTube. I've also written a lot of articles, and if you visit this website, there's content going back here several years. In fact, you can go back to some of my older ones about, some of the stuff was pivoted around Spring Boot, but it's not the only thing I've written about. Just some lessons, fiscal lessons in engineering economics, stuff like that. So this is some of the stuff I've covered. And the idea is I wanted to build a website that was really fast, okay? And for several years, I had turned to a technology stack some of you have probably heard of called WordPress. WordPress is essentially an artifact of the LAMP era. Linux, Apache web server. L is for Linux, A is for Apache web server, M is for MySQL, in other words, a relational database, and P is for PHP. And so WordPress is a LAMP stack implementation, and every page you visit, you're hitting a website, it's making a call to a database, it's fetching the content, it's rendering it. There's limitations in that and what it can do. Now, it can go a long way. It's a generic toolkit. There's lots of plugins. There's 100,000 plugins or something like that. A plugin for everything. You need to integrate with Stripe to collect payment. You need to integrate with Amazon because you list books or products on there. You want to integrate with, you name it, they've got plugins for it. And what it's getting you away from is learning how to build it yourself or possibly building yourself. At a certain point, it says, do this easy to do plugin, and you don't have to learn how to do any of that. Well, at a certain point, it's almost a form of technical debt that you've accumulated when you do that. And in that sense, it's kind of denying you to learn how to do stuff. And it can slow it down because there can be sloppy coding practices in there. A lot of the times, these toolkits, what they aggregate is the need to have JavaScript on every single page. JavaScript. Former colleague of mine, good old Ollie. If you're tuning in, Ollie, good to see you. We would build these websites. You'd use something like React technology or in WordPress, whatever. All the modules, all the plugins that you have that need a chunk of JavaScript, you got to get it in there, get it in there, get it in there. And so it basically builds this giant compiled module to let you do. Getting pelted with requests here. Just a second. See, what was that? Okay. On vacation, so the kiddos are hitting me up for requests to run apps. Okay, so you start getting this jumbo module. It's modular. I'm not going to go in the finer points of how JavaScript modules work, but essentially you get a big bundle of JavaScript that has all the code that satisfies everybody on every page in one bundle, and it's downloaded for every page. The cost of that is now you're hitting a website, so you're loading the HTML. That HTML has to load CSS. So it has to load the images that go on the page. It's having to load that big hunk of JavaScript. and then strategically and deploy some of the functions in there. And then it goes and well, and part of that was there was a database call, and there could be more database calls that it has to do. So you run into this fiasco of the site is slowing down, and you start looking for plugins to cache the site, and it's not working. Or you get a little bit of a speed up, but nothing that you're looking for. And today, in this day and age, what do we need to be seen on the internet for SEO to recognize us, for the Googles and the Yahoos and the Bings and whatever to pick up on our website? Well, at one point in time, they said SSL. If you don't have your site secured with SSL, we ain't paying attention to you. We ain't doing it. So people steer towards that, and that's a hosting provider. Your hosting provider can usually offer that at no effort on your end. But some of the things they've said is speed. Speed starts to help your ranking now. If your speed is faster, mobile. If your site is mobile friendly, the search engines that are serving your website can look at your page and analyze how well it's doing for mobile accessibility and help improve its ranking. So now we need to build a website that's fast. I mean, just fast, fast, fast. We need a website that is able to be not just mobile friendly, almost think of it like mobile first, because a lot of times over 50% of your hits are coming from mobile devices. Mobile first. And how about just enough JavaScript for what you need to do on a given page? This is what Astro is. I'm going to put it up here. It's the let me put it up here. So let me put the page up. So Astro.js, or just Astro, is a web building technology that got kind of pushed in front of my face when I was trying to resolve a different issue, while I was having a little conversation with ChatGPT. And it mentioned, hey, have you looked at this? Astro.js has several things that it starts from. And the first thing is this idea called the island architecture. The island architecture says this: if you're on a given page and there's no need for JavaScript and this page can be statically generated, then do that. No JavaScript loading. A statically generated website. And it even has a compilation step that says, okay, you can read it in human readable HTML. In fact, they have an Astro templating library. You can read it in that format, but we're going to compile it for the final product and optimize the heck out of it. Do you have images on that page? Okay, you can have one version of the images of an image, but it can look at the image icon you're using, and if on that page you're putting a thumbnail image that has a height and width limitation that shrinks it down to size, it will generate an optimized version of that image for that page. So it's optimizing where it can. It's cutting out stuff that doesn't have to be there. So if there's no need for JavaScript, no JavaScript, pure HTML. And Astro also comes with, by default, it uses Tailwind for CSS, which I have come to love and adore. And it's freaking awesome. Some of the other stuff that it has is it has this thing called content-driven, okay? Content-driven websites. What does that mean? They have something called a collections API. So what you can have is you can go create a folder of content. And in that folder, in fact, I'm gonna switch to another view. Let me put his page up here. Let me see. There we go. Share screen. Okay, I'm going to pull up the IDE view of my content here. Source data, no, not data. Source content articles. And these are all the articles I have. And these are the articles I wrote in 2024. So basically, this is a markdown document. This is one piece of content, this file right here. Am I sharing it right? Yes. Let's put it down like this. So here's the one I wrote. So this is a markdown document, and this is basically one of my articles. Basically, everything in this folder is one collection, and this is called my article collection. And the idea is I can go in here and write an article in this format. It has a this is some pre-matter up here. It has the title. Every one of my articles has a title. It has an excerpt, a featured image, publish date. It's got a flag to indicate whether it's published. I have tags or categories. Some of my articles, I put a YouTube video at the bottom of it. So I have this little YouTube tag that conditionally renders a YouTube element if that's there. And it has some additional SEO elements. But then the rest of it is just pure content that I'm writing. And what this lets me get to, if I sit there and reshare the other page. So if I go back to Pro Coder, I can go find that article. Let's see, when was that one? Okay, yeah, this was the I Hate New Year's Resolutions one. So here's the title, I Hate New Year's Resolutions. That was the publishing date. I think that's the one I'm on. Yeah. Here's the featured image. I used AI to build that thing. And here's the stuff. It's got images. This is the crux of the article. And here's the link. This is the YouTube ID that it rendered. And this was written in 2024. And this is all hanging inside my website. Really smooth feature. So let's go look at the template that is rendering that, okay? Yeah, that's the fun thing with StreamYard is I have to keep stopping and sharing the screen in order to bop between these tools. So what I have here is this is the piece of content that I use. So this is the article that we just looked at. But I have over here in the pages section, I actually have underneath articles, I have this template here. And what this template does is what Astro will do is it'll go read all the articles that I have. It picks them all up. This is in the compilation step, and it runs them through this little function call here. Let's zoom it like this. Get static pass. This is a static page generating template. And it's going to it runs this function one time. And what it does is it grabs that collection. The collections are the articles collection. It fetches them all. This is TypeScript now. It maps over every article. And then it basically processes it. Okay. All the content gets fed in there. And then all the pre-matter I get access to. And then what it does, it starts to curate. This is some code that's basically, first of all, it gets the raw content inside the article gets rendered. It's also able to lift out what's the copyright year. I have a little functionality where it computes what's the estimated time to read it. There's other article reading websites. I'm in the middle of a live stream, buddy. Can I talk to you later?
Okay, this will be the switch game case.
Okay, I don't know where that is. So it does a computation on how many words there are and what's the estimated reading time for that. A lot of other platforms will do that for you. It goes and does little SEO stuff for me. And then finally we get to the actual material. Let me shrink this down here. In fact, let me close this down here. And what is this? This is pure HTML. Well, this is not pure HTML. This is actually called an Astro template. So you can recognize the HTML, but it also has the ability, it looks a lot like JSX, okay? So I can check that did this particular article have a featured image? If it did, go render an image. It's going to render an image element, and then it's going to follow it with a div item, Now it has this thing. This is like an empty tag. So in other words, this construct lets me embed a single HTML tag, and so it has this sort of empty thing that lets me put in two items. So up top, it's able to do the image. It also has this thing called a layout. So this way, this is another pre-built set of HTML that I can slip in here. And this lets me make sure that every page has a consistent look and feel. And then I get to the actual meat of the article. All right. So here's a H1 for the title. Here's the div. This has the basically the publishing date, dot, and then it has that reading time that it computed up above. And then finally it renders the categories. And down here it again does it puts the image in. Okay, this is what I forgot. What it does is behind the title of the image, it actually uses the image itself, but it does it in a sort of a Gaussian blur to generate a unique look and feel behind the title. This is where it actually draws the image that you saw on the page. And then finally, right here in the middle, it throws in the actual markdown rendered as HTML that I have. And finally, at the bottom, it checks and says, well, did you have a YouTube ID? If so, here's a YouTube chunk of HTML you can put in with a parameter of that video ID. Also, it says, did you have a canonical link to another place? Is this an article that came from somewhere else? And finally, I can put the copyright on here. Now we can go look at what's that YouTube element that we have. This is an Astro template, but this is a little fragment of code. What this is letting me do is I'm getting in here and I'm building a web page, and the point is it's statically compiling a lot of the content. So when you go to visit one of these particular pages, there's no JavaScript in there that has anything to do with subscribing to my newsletter because it's not needed. There's nowhere to subscribe for that on that page, so why put the JavaScript there? There's no JavaScript for some of the other stuff, or like there might be a little bit that gets loaded with the YouTube tag, but only if it exists for that particular article. This is the actual component, and essentially it has one property. It has this video ID that gets fed to it. And so part of this is I started off with this is the HTML that it does, and then down here it's got a little chunk of some JavaScript that gets embedded into the object, into this page that gets loaded. Now, part of this is there's something else you can do, and you may have heard of this. You may have heard of this before I did. Have you ever heard of a lighthouse report run on a website? You get dinged a lot for putting stuff on the critical path that delays rendering the page. It also looks for security issues, but with Astro as your toolkit to build, you're able to get a much higher lighthouse score. I was in the 60s when I checked this out from a WordPress perspective, but with the Astro and also some strategic tweaking and stuff, I've been able to get up to a 98 or a 99 reading. One of the things I have it do there is when I have a YouTube component, I have it put some extra code to detect whether or not it's above the fold. There's some pages on my website you load, and there's a YouTube link to run way down at the bottom of the page. Well, if the person never scrolls, there's no point in running the YouTube and fetching the thumbnail for that YouTube video unless it's about to come up above the fold. This is the kind of stuff you're able to do with Astro. Now, I mentioned statically generated sites. So the idea is it'll compile and generate static HTML where possible. But you can also slide in bits of JavaScript where they're needed, and only the amount of JavaScript that you're needed. And that's really powerful. What I want to do is let's go back to the layout that I had there on the first page, okay? So this is where I get to kind of set the tone of what my website looks like. And I borrowed this. There's a particular Astro toolkit called Titan. You can call it a theme, but it's more like a basis for building a website, because you can build whatever you want, because this is Astro. You just start writing HTML, but I wanted to find a look and feel that I already liked. So essentially every page that I have has these parts. It has a title, optionally a title, a description, some kind of image. There's this footer call to action. I also added a canonical URL in case you need a link to another site. Some of my pages are landing pages where I don't want the header or the footer rendered. Instead, I just want the content that's in the middle. On some pages, I have a shopping cart. My website will integrate with Stripe, so you can buy books directly from me cheaper than you can get them from anywhere else. And then finally, some other header content. But essentially, this is where you kind of see some of this head tag stuff. If you built websites, you know what I'm talking about, where you're having to put stuff up here, and things like your fave icon, and there's other stuff, and there's a robots policy I have in place, or fonts, that kind of stuff. Let's scoot this over here. Um, and here's the general body of it. But I can sit there and say, if there's no landing, if the landing page flag is not flipped to true, then render the header element. This is the slot. So when you're invoking the layout element, whatever is between that and the closing tag is the slot value that then gets put right here. So this is the central content gets in here, and this is what comes after your content. So if it is a landing page and it's a shopping cart, then I'm going to render a cart button and it's going to float to the top. If it's not a landing page, then I'm going to put the footer tag. Now, this one came with the ability to switch themes, and so I leave this element in there but comment it out. And then finally, there's this little script that runs, and it's a library called Animate on Scroll. And this is one of those things that makes it possible that I put up here. This is one of those things that when you're scrolling pages, you see elements, kind of magically float into place instead of be really, really fixed. So even though it's static, there's a touch of movement that's just makes it look good. Let's look at some more of the bits and pieces here. Yeah, this theme switcher is, I could switch between their pre-baked colors, but I plugged in my own color schema. And so essentially, I gave you, this is an example of how I do stuff, but I can look at, let's look at a real simple page, okay? Here, let's look at this bio page that I have. Some of this is out of date because I don't do social media anymore. So I don't do X or LinkedIn, so I need to cut these out. But here, again, I'm able to use the same layout with title and description. I have this inner hero content. And again, just some simple, some structure here. And this is not really complicated. Here's my first big thing here's my biography. If you want to know me at a 30,000 foot view, here you go. A little bit more, another section is what's Greg's experience. Well, here's a link to go find out what that is. If you actually want to read my curriculum vitae, the CV, it's also called a resume in the States. Here's a listing where I say, here's writing, and then I've got a component, the book grid. This is just another component that if you dig into it, it's just more HTML. I make reference to things like I've spoken at conferences, on podcasts, and also on this YouTube channel. Here's a link to some video content, and then the stuff at the bottom here. And this is the bio. So this is what I have in here. And this gets, when you compile this, it gets compiled here into this, okay? This is the output. So this has been run through all the processing, all the tags and the embedded bits get done in here. I have a little bit of Google Analytics here because I want to just to track some stats of who's coming from where and doing what. And it's able to compile JavaScript into the right format so that it works right. And so this is an optimized web page. And what I can do here is let's go back to the site, and we'll go look, and let's look at that. So now I can take this and I can go, okay, what was that? Okay, bio. That's what all that was. The layout put this little header at the top for me with my brand and everything. Here's the title and here's the description. Here's that biography we looked at. That looks nice. Here's a CV. And notice how focus in, and I can, at a glance, I can see what's going to be on the page because I'm just looking at pure HTML, and I can make sure that this stuff all has the same look and feel, and I'm not fighting some CRM tool. Here's a list of books. Now there's a little bit of nice JavaScript. Every time I'm hovering over one of these book titles, it kind of puts this little glare on here, and you can just see at a glance, oh, it looks like Greg wrote some stuff. Finally, there's that one video I did. This is a presentation I gave at Austin Peay State University 2 years ago. Finally, here's a link to follow Greg. He used to have my other social media, but this is what I'm really doing when it comes to social media. So now that sounds like a lot of work, and it is. That is a lot of work to go build a website from scratch, and this is what makes a lot of people say, I can't stop doing WordPress. Okay, so how can I do this? How can I make this change? Well, there's a little tool that I've been using to help me do all that, because I can tell you right now, I'm not a CSS expert, but I've learned a lot. And it's this guy. Let me see, am I sharing? What I haven't seen, I kind of shooed it away earlier, but I have been using Claude Code for the past year. And basically, the way it's designed, it's an agentic AI tool. What that means is it's designed to run in a terminal. Okay, I can come in here. So I can send a command to Claude Code, and it's just like talking to one of these chat AI tools that can help me out. So, and not only does it give me an answer back, but if I give it an instruction, it goes out and can make changes in the repo, in the code, and it can look at the output, and it tries to analyze if the output sounds like it's meeting the command that I gave it. I just said, how's it going, Claude? I'm live streaming about all that you've done for me to help me build procoder.io. It says, things are going well. That's great to hear you're live streaming about the procoder.io build. It's been a solid project to work on. The DMZ architecture with the secure backend, the Stripe integration, content collections, and all the pieces that make up the e-commerce flow. Let me know if you need anything during the stream, whether it's explaining how something works, making changes, or demonstrating features. I'm here to help. With this tool, I can give it a command and say, I'm getting washed out here. Here, let's set it up here, and I can give you the lowdown. So, what Claude Code is able to do is it's not building the website for me. It's carrying out commands that I'm giving it. What does that mean? What I can do is, if you can imagine in any situation, we have two coders. You have a senior coder and a junior coder. The senior coder is like, this is what we're doing. The senior coder's got the vision. The junior coder doesn't have all the experience, but the junior coder is eager and energetic to start typing code. So you can sit there and give an instruction, say, I want you to build this. So the junior coder rushes out and builds it and brings it back to the senior developer and says, this is what I got. What do you think? And then you can give feedback and say, I would like you to make this tweak to it, okay? I'm going to go tell them, okay, start analyzing the architecture of the application and generate a summary.md file at the root of the project, illustrate it all. So I'm giving it a job to do, and let's see what it can do while we're talking here. So Claude can go carry out my command. And the thing is, sometimes the command, the things you tell it you want it to do are simple. Like, I want to change from blues being the primary color to red, something like that. Well, it can go do that. It can, first of all, it can scan the entire project and figure out where that is happening. Where is it configured with blue? Oh, there it is. Let's adjust it to red. Well, that's a simple thing. Or you can say something like, I want to integrate with Stripe's API and collect payments from a shopping cart. That's a much bigger thing than changing the color schema of a website. So this is some of the stuff that you have the ability to do. And to carry out a much bigger task like with Stripe's API to collect payment, that requires a lot more feedback steps. It can go write code, integrate with current bits of code. It can sit there and try to guess where do you need that hooked into your app, and it'll go do all that, and it'll bring it to you and say, here's all the changes I made. Sometimes it has follow-up questions where Claude is it's unsure which direction you go, or Claude sees 2 or 3 paths to go. Or it can recognize, well, this API says there's a limitation, and that way is idiomatic. What do you want me to do? Sometimes it guesses about what you want to do and it makes a mistake. Sometimes it stops and asks you questions and you need to interact with it. But this is a lot more like the process of if you just imagine a senior developer talking to a junior developer and trying to offer commentary about how to do this and how to do that. So I've been able to do strategy sessions where, okay, I built the hooks so that this app will talk to Stripe, to collect payments. Now, all those the articles that I showed you, those are statically compiled, and statically compiled code anybody can pull down and read. There's situations where you do not want to have static content. And that's especially if you have any form of credentials, because if you use credentials from some property file and they get injected into the template and rendered as static HTML, somebody's going to see what that is. That's a situation where you need instead of a statically generated site, the SGS, you need a server side rendering. So you need a different template that renders on the server, not statically. And Astro lets you do that. Astro lets you flag it on a page by page basis, whether this page is statically generated or this page is dynamic and run on the server. The ones that are run on the server are where I have things like I have property files with credentials in them. And it can read the properties from an environment variable. So when I deploy that app to the platform I deploy it to, it's able to do that. Now, if you notice here, Claude has started to generate something, and it's prompting me to say, do I want to continue with that? I'm going to say, yes. Go ahead and write that file. And we'll look at that in a second. And so I can create a server-side page that's meant to do processing like that. The thing is, I'll have static pages that I want to make. I want to be the origination of collecting payments. And so I can tell Claude to say, on this website, I want a button that adds something to the cart. Okay. So I had it help me write some JavaScript. I had some fundamental ideas of how it worked. And then I was able to give the task to Claude to go build the code for it. And then I could review the code that it wrote. So we iterated through and got the shopping cart to work. So it would build up the cart. And then I would say, I need you to take the cart and I'm going to submit it to this server-side route for processing. And the server-side route, I know the code doesn't appear in anybody's browser, so it's secure. Now, there's some extra layers of security I implemented in there to guarantee nobody was hacking the cart. Because the other trick is somebody can get a shopping cart in their browser and they can go into the developer console and manipulate the price of products, or they can say, I got it in the cart, let me change it from quantity 1 to 100 and get 100 free paperbacks or something like that. Well, I put in checks to be like, well, a lot of people will try to manipulate the price, or I can manipulate the price to be a negative amount and get the system to give me back money. Well, there's something called server-side price validation. And I actually learned this from an independent toolkit that you can buy to collect e-commerce payments. You go and register the price of all your products, and before your shopping cart is carried out, it double checks it against your inventory. So I basically had Claude Code help me implement the same functionality. So I have this server-side validation put in. So once all that's done and you've got an authenticated, verified shopping cart, you can then take it to Stripe and integrate. And it let me work with that. And I found out Stripe has a sandbox. Stripe has a sandbox environment when you're testing. So I did as much as I could in a sandbox environment, verified I had it all working.
And then I switched to live mode with Stripe and actually bought my book from myself several times. I collected payment from myself. The payment went to Stripe. And then within 2 to 3 days, Stripe had routed that payment minus their fees into my business checking account. And then I also was able, once I verified the payment would happen, I then was able to link it to order processing and then have the orders end up sending me an email link. So then I had to, the next step I had to build, and all this is order fulfillment. So I needed the ability to send collect payment and then deliver an ebook. And the thing I am working on next is I'm working on a mechanism to sell paperbacks directly from my website. There's a particular provider. You can't do that with KDP, with Amazon's book paperback solution. But there's a thing called Lulu. Lulu is another print service that you use to do paperbacks, and they have something called Lulu Print API. So you can feed it everything. You can give it the order, the customer, the address that it's going to, and you can send it the interior file, a PDF, and the cover. And you can send it with all the right data, and basically it will turn it into a printed book. It's going to ship it to the customer's address, and then it collects a payment from you. There's a cost of printing that's extracted from your bank account. So fundamentally, to do the purchase on that, you need to collect the money for the paperback and then turn around and file a Lulu order, and then they'll collect the cost. So hopefully the amount of money you collected is enough to cover the cost of printing. But anyway, that's enough about that. So that's what I'm working to get through and verify that that's working. And so this is the stuff that by using Claude is built around TypeScript. TypeScript is pretty nifty. Okay, I've taken a shine to using TypeScript for stuff because it's sort of like it reminds me of Lisp and whatnot, which is what's called a homoarchaic language, where the data and the code are in the same format. And TypeScript is very similar to that because you have JSON structures natively built into the language with TypeScript. And so TypeScript, you're able to take JSON structures, map over them, iterate over them, filter over them, whatever you can imagine, it's all right there. And you're not jumping through an impedance mismatch of some other technology stack. Get this. Well, it's good to see my buddy Manuel Jordan. I haven't seen you in a while, but I know you're going to catch up on this later. We haven't talked to him in a while, so it's good to see you, buddy. So, and the thing is with Claude Code, I feel like there's a lot of misperceptions, in my opinion, with these AI tools out there. Now, there's something called vibe coding, which is if I go pick up and use this tool, am I letting the tool write the code for me? Well, there's an element of if you don't know what you're doing, then yeah, that's what's happening. But this is more like I'm using the AI tools to help me do stuff. And what it's doing, it's educating me at the point in time when I need the tool to help me do something. And then I review the code. There's a strong contextual awareness of what I'm doing with the code and what the code actually has in it. That is actually helping me learn new APIs I've never used before. It's helping me. It's ramped up my ability to write TypeScript. This is different than sitting down and reading a book and then going and using the code. I mean, that would be akin to reading a book on how to use a hammer and nails and then going out and doing that. In coding, we need to be hammering the nails to understand how that works. You don't understand what it means to aim and hit and aim and hit. You don't understand it the same until you've hit your thumb several times and banged your thumb with the hammer. And then you learn what to do and what not to do operationally. And this is a lot of the deal with code. There's so many metaphors we apply to code that we want to stick to it that don't fit. There's a strong aspect of engineering that's rooted in our nature of building bridges and buildings and stuff. And I think I heard Dick Wall from Scala Days, whatever, one time describe that as, well, that paradigm works as long as the the ends of both sides of the river aren't moving, or the nature of the bridge is fixed. And the thing is that's where our metaphor falls apart, because code changes all the time. We're always reconstructing the endpoints. We're always changing what's in the middle. We're changing what rides over these endpoints. So these static construction ideas, they're good to get one point across, but 3 or 4, and you start to strain the limit of the metaphor. Another friend of mine, Russ Miles, talked about how a lot of coding is really R&D. There's other sciences and devotions and stuff you can work on, where the idea is, what can you do in 2 weeks, in 6 weeks, in 3 months, in a year? Can we do that with coding? Depends on what you're doing. If it's maintenance where I'm fixing bugs, I'm fixing bugs to an already built system, that's one thing. But if I'm building something totally new, that's a lot harder to eyeball. And this is what led to the extreme programming movement and to things like the Agile Manifesto, which was like, it's really hard to predict stuff. The further out your estimate goes, the more wrong it tends to be. So it gave fuel to the idea of let's work in 2-week segments and sprints, and let's see what progress we can make, and let's always be trying to steer the ship in the right direction based on feedback. Okay, let's focus on that, and maybe we can have a better throughput sense. Okay. And this is some of the stuff where it's almost like when I sit down to build a site, to build something, what do I want to do with this site? What's the thing I want to do? And it's like, I want to offer features to you to learn how to be a better coder. I want to have links to get to videos like this. I want to have links to articles that I've written. I want to have links to other relevant content. Well, I wrote a book. I might as well put it up here if I'm going to mention it. I wrote a book called 12 Rules for Pro Coders that really is chock full of a lot of good information. And I want to be able to make it easy for you to get to the book. Frankly, it doesn't cost a lot. I think it's like $10 or something in ebook format. And it's like, if you're going to go read a book this year, you should be spending money every year reading and growing your skill set. Is it ridiculous to ask you to spend $10 this year on a book like this? That I think I spent 6 to 12 months writing this book to put all these lessons that I learned through my own experiences. So the idea is, what does it take to just put that on a website and offer that at a reasonable price, mark it down slightly from what I have it listed for on Amazon? That shouldn't be hard to do, especially since everything out there, well, almost everything out there has an API. Stripe has an API. I used to use a service called bookfunnel.com to deliver the books. Well, I got rid of that. I had Claude Code help me get rid of that. I implemented that myself with Claude Code. I have another website that's behind ProCoder that I use for order fulfillment to manage the stuff. And so that's the other thing. It mentions the DMZ structure of this architecture. None of the orders, none of the customer data. If you make a purchase from me, there's a record of your order stored away, not in ProCoder. I have a back-end order fulfillment system I built that runs parallel with ProCoder. So here's ProCoder, here's my order fulfillment system. The order fulfillment system is not publicly available on the internet. It's only available to me through a secured page. And even that page is secured down such that there's no server-side components. So the idea is here, we want to go build things, and I'm not counting on these AI tools to be up and operational for the website to work. I'm just helping them help me build the website and function as a junior coder. And it's elevated my thinking to where I can think about, what's the problem I need to solve? Order fulfillment for paperbacks. I'm thinking about adding, and I'm not thinking about, I'm planning to add some kind of back end that's available to anybody who's purchased a product from me. I want to offer special videos that you can get to that don't cost anything for you. I want to make these sort of resources available to you, and you should be able to get to them. But I don't want a dashboard. I don't want a login page. I want something where, okay, you can go try to access the page, and you enter the email address associated with your order, and I will send you a token, a randomly generated token that's good for 6 hours. And after 6 hours, the token expires. so you can get in and view it. Okay. Now, why don't we go take a look at our nice little report that got generated for us. Okay, this is our summary document. Let's shrink this down. Let's put this in presentation mode. So this is Procoder.io's architecture summary. So it's built with Astro 5 using TypeScript, uses Tailwind for custom theming. Actually, this is the place I have it deployed on, Cloudflare Workers, where some of the pages, and maybe the element is about 10% of the pages are server-side rendered. The rest are statically generated and really fast. And I mentioned that this is basically a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. What that means is there is no private data in this app. If somebody were to download the entire generated code base, there's nothing there. The passwords are not even there because they're bound in the runtime environment as environmental variables that's fed to the app when it starts up. And guess what? There is no database in here. This app does not have a database. The mechanism I use to store order data in my order fulfillment system is different than a database. And so it actually went and gave me a readout on all the content. So we have articles. Yeah, I don't like the word blog post. That's why I call them articles. Books. I also have newsletters on here, which you can get to. There's some legal pages. And then I also actually have presentations in the form of slideshows. Yes, I have some APIs to have to do with subscribes and downloading and whatnot. And then I have pages for each of the books. So I have a feature where if you sign up to buy the ebook, it's going to offer you a deal where it says, hey, if you upgrade, you can get the audiobook for a reduced price. Hey, why not? And then there's some reusable components that I use across all the pages. A particular layout. You can have multiple layouts if you want. Now, here's the structure is I define by data. I don't mean customer data. I'm just about the data that configure the site. Like what's the site address? What's some SEO tags? I have a special listing for all the products. What are all the categories in my articles? Then I have some additional TypeScript utilities, so on and so forth. So if a user buys something with Procoder, it goes through Stripe, and then my actual storage system is I open up a GitHub issue and it's inside a private repo for every new order. And that feeds my dashboard order fulfillment system, which ultimately sends out an email from Greg at greg@turnquist.com. There's some other stuff. These are all the content collections I have. Now, one time I even had it where, it doesn't have here's some of the theming. It also has there's some other flows I'm not going to go into. This is already getting long enough. So let's bring it back to here. So basically what Claude Code has been able to do for me, it's a combination. It's like a synergy. Astro has given me the ability to build a super fast website that actually does what I want to do. So I've been able to spend a weekend or 3 days or 4 hours, sometimes 1 hour on a particular feature that I want. And I'm able to go into Claude Code, and Claude Code is integrated. The code all sits in a GitHub repo, a private GitHub repo. And I can go to Claude Code and say, I want to do this thing. Oh, create a branch. Here's what I'm fixing. Okay, it does all the work. Now I can squash all the commits down into a single commit. I can say, look at all the work that was done, and I want you to rewrite the commit to summarize it for me. And now go in and open a new issue in GitHub, and I want you to then take this branch and turn it into a pull request so I can make my own paper trail. This is also something good the AI tools are good at, reading what you did and extracting the context and summarizing. So now I can go read the record on procoder.io on GitHub. I know it's secure. I know people are not accessing that repo and getting into it. Even then, there's no passwords in that repo. I can go rotate the passwords as needed. There's no database to hack. There's no administrative dashboard for anybody to log into and hack on this website. Okay? It's a statically generated website with a few routes on the server. And it's able to do all this stuff. So it's like it's more secure, more performant, and it costs less. And I'm not having to run it on DreamHost. I used to use DreamHost for hosting for WordPress. I don't have to pay for that. I have a free GitHub repo because Microsoft bought GitHub, and now private repos are free. I deploy it to Cloudflare, and Cloudflare says your first 100,000 hits per month are free. And you get 3,000 builds a month for free. And after that, if you see those limits, it's meter-based pricing. If I'm hitting over 100,000 pages and they're going to charge me on the chunk, that's probably a fair deal. I don't mind paying for stuff that's worth it. So this has really helped me relaunch and build something I like and not something that I dread. And so I'm actually looking at the last WordPress site that I maintain. It happens to be for my wife's publishing business. That is a website's over 10 years old. And I am trying to work with making an Astro-based version of that website. That one takes a lot more work. There's a lot more custom content in there that I need to deal with. But I'm trying to work my way through that and use Claude Code. And what does Claude Code cost? By the way, this today's episode of the Pro Code Show is not sponsored by Claude Code or a particular latte provider. I used to pay ChatGPT $20 a month. I canceled that, and now I pay Claude Code $20 a month. $20 a month. Now I do hit limits. I talked to a friend of mine, Dan Vega. He did the foreword for my Pro Coder's Guide to AI. He's a dear friend of mine. He pays Anthropic $100 a month. I have reached points where I hit limits, and it says, okay, your limits are up. You need to wait 4 hours, or you need to wait till the next day. For what I get out of it, basically, if I can get a 4-hour coding session out every day, which I don't have 4 hours of spare idle time to go spend on this website. I get a lot of bang for the buck from Pro Coder using Claude Code. It is fantastic. I do want to put a code up here. If you're interested to become a member, you can go join the channel here. Now, I need to update some of these. That's a buy me a coffee. I don't have buy me a coffee anymore. But if you're interested, the Pro Coder Show is back. I'm wanting to make more content to kind of give you tips and tricks. And by the way, the show is not sponsored by anybody. It wasn't sponsored by Astro either. The people who sponsored Astro is Cloudflare just announced acquisition of Astro this past week. So I'm actually doubly excited to hear that. So they got major funding. But if you want to join this YouTube channel that it's hosted on, you can become a member there. Now, as soon as the show's done, I'm going to cut it, download it, pull it down, and I will upload it to Spotify. So you can also catch it on your favorite podcasting platform, and you can check it out there. And be sure to give me a like if you enjoyed this episode. We'll do some more. And with that, I'll bid you good day.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.